Don't want to cut any heads off.
No. All rolling?
No, I could roll it whenever you say so.
Sure. Let's roll. Let's roll.
Okay, it is recording. And I have the microphone on. Go for it.
Oh, Ron, tell me, how did you first get into photography?
Okay, come on over here. I'd invite you to hang your coat up. However, my guest closet is filled with rather large images. As you can see, very large images. This is the Olson farm, from Cushing, Maine, where Andrew Wyatt did the painting of Christina's World. So, come on in. This is my studio, sort of a one-bedroom condo, and which I've converted into a studio, and it just worked really well. And I also use it as a classroom. I take this table away, and you see all the chairs piled up. Sunday night, I have 10 chairs all lined up, and I pull down the blinds, I put the door against the window, I put the track lighting on, and my students will bring in new work, and we get a chance to critique the work and talk about it and share our findings about photography. So we could carry on. I take photographic tours like all over the world. This is Miyajima Island, the Torii Gate there, which in Japan, I've made a number of trips to Japan and Ireland here, Murisk Abbey, with the light just kind of streaming through. In fact, I'll be back in Ireland in March, and I'll be back in May as well. So I keep on traveling, keep on going. Let me show you some work in this room here, Simeon. Muskintyre Beach, a famous beach in the Isle of Lewis, I believe, in the Outer Hebrides. I was just in Scotland a few months ago, and every time I'm in Scotland, I see something different. And actually, I love the Stones of Callanish, one of my favorite places. Achill Island in County Mayo, in Ireland, another place I just love going to. And these little humps of grass, this is Iceland. I've just decorated my studio with images that I enjoy seeing. I was very, very fortunate back in the 60s when I would have questions. I wrote letters like this: Ansel Adams, Carmel, California. And they arrived. And he always responded to my emails. He answered all my questions. He was just incredibly helpful. And I was shooting 8x10 film back then, and had lots of questions. I just didn't know who to ask, because I didn't know anybody else doing 8x10 negatives, in such a large format. But I moved to that size because I loved the work of Edward Weston. I discovered his work back in the late 50s. And so Ansel was just a huge help to me. And fortunately, we had a good friend in common, Paul Caponegro, so that was kind of my segue. And so Ansel always would say, give my regards to Paul. And Ansel came to Boston, I think about 1972. He gave a talk at the Boston Photographic Resource Center. So we got a chance to meet, and we spent about an hour together chatting, and that wonderful experience, just wonderful. Well, let's go back. I mentioned to you the Stones of Callanish in Scotland, from the Outer Hebrides. One of my favorite places to go. People often ask me, what's my favorite country? They're all my favorite country. The world is my favorite planet. In fact, our Earth is my favorite planet around. So So, this is my studio. These are my books. I've been reading these books I've read them all, sometimes twice, and I find them inspirational. I've always kind of been drawn towards inspirational books. Books. I'm not really into the fantasy books or modern books. These are kind of rather traditional books. And I've been in a number of different sort of groups, like commentaries. Nicole's book, and he studied with Gurdjieff, and I was in a group for many, many years. So I come into what would be the kitchen. Just before you came, I was printing. This is my printer. It'll do 17 by 22 size prints. It's a Canon printer. Really, really excellent. I have 2 computers set up over here, and a big monitor as well. So I kind of could work out all the fine details. When I make a print, I could really enlarge it and see if I have to do any corrections before making a print. Having the house, I had this house in Ireland for 40 years, and would collect lots of music. So, just to give you an idea of some of my collection of CDs, and I have an eclectic taste in music. I have I'm a child of like Happy Days, literally, like, late 50s and 60s, when Blue Suede Shoes first came out by Carl Perkins before Elvis sang it. So that's kind of my era. So I grew up in the days of the sock hop, and, you'd win a football game and you'd parade up and down the town in your jalopy, Now, this would have been where the washer and dryer would have been in this studio, and I'm telling you, it's a bit crowded. I have 10 mat cutters when I do my mat cutting workshops here, which I do in a number of venues. I've done it. I do it in Concord every year. In fact, I do a mat cutting workshop there in a number of vocational schools. These are all matted prints. I'll give you take the top one off here. Here's one from the Sahara 11 by 14 print, kind of kept in archival plastic. So I literally have hundreds of prints. This pile here are unmatted silver prints. These boxes are unmatted silver prints. These are sort of matted works. These are all these boxes are filled with unmatted silver prints. Each one of them. Storage boxes, because I'm always mailing prints, to different galleries, where people order prints, and I have to box them up. So I keep a collection of boxes as well. Well, in this studio, I get work ready for exhibitions. I've like a big show in the Fitchburg Art Museum right now, and I have a number of gallery shows coming up. So all this equipment is used to get prints printed, matted, and framed, and that's what I use the studio for. And it's also a classroom. Sunday nights is my classroom, but now I cut most of my mats on this mat cutter here. And I have a larger mat cutter in the other room if I'm doing really, really large work. But this will handle up to a 32-inch size mat. So the majority of my work, I do on this mat cutter. Oh, this is kind of fun. I have to show you this. This is me in 1971 with my 8x10 Deerdoff. and I worked with that camera till about 1990 or 1995, and somehow the camera got heavier as I got older. Don't know how that happened. So I went to a 4x5, and now I'm very happy doing digital photography. And let me talk just a little bit about that, because a lot of people ask me about that, because for 50 years I was a film photographer, you know, and worked with Minor White at MIT for a number of years. Well, it was private workshops at his house where he lived in Arlington. And you know, and I'd lead these workshops all over the world, and people started showing up with digital cameras, and I didn't know the first thing about a digital camera. I figured I'd better learn about digital photography or practice packing bags in the supermarket. And learning about digital photography, packing bags, learning about digital photography, it was a learning curve. But, the quality has just gotten so good, I would never go back to the darkroom. And I often tell people the reason I didn't switch earlier, two things: fear and ignorance. Fear, like I was really known as a black and white, large format photographer. It's a little scary starting from the beginning again, but that's really what it was. And I just had to bite the bullet and do it. And ignorance, I didn't know where to start. I mean, there's a lot to digital photography. And, as they say in Morocco, shwaya shwaya, means slow, slow. I learned one thing at a time. And as I would tell my students, the way you learn is to have a question. And then you find out, you get the answer. So come on into this room. This would have been the bedroom in this condo. But it's my workspace with two big counters here. As soon as I make a print, I let them dry for about 24 hours on this table, and then I measure them, very carefully, and put them in a mat, just like the work you see on the walls here. And this big cutter and that table is where I cut down 32 by 40 size mats to the final size. And it depends. Like if I'm doing a large print, well, that's going to be like basically 24 by 29. I might do 11 by 14 and have that on a 16 by 20 mat. But by buying the 32 by 40s, it's a little bit less expensive when I get a box of 25 of them. Still, for one of the most expensive parts of photography is getting, rag board, quality board. So that's what this room's all about. Plus I have storage against the wall here. You see I have these different categories: Greenland, Cuba, Czech Republic, Final Haven, Italy, Southwest USA, local Morocco, Peru, Iceland, New Zealand, Japan. These are all the different countries that I work in. Out of the room, I have a large mat cutter where I cut down I have the boards over there, the 32 by 40 acid-free rag boards, and my standard size for like an average 16 by 20 print is 24 by 29. And it's interesting. When I was a kid, I wasn't great in math, but as I got into photography, I had learned how to be far more precise. In photography, neatness counts, and as a kid, my mom used to clean up after me, I have to admit, and but now I'm a fanatic, I'll tell you, about keeping things in place and measuring precisely. In fact, I do a lot of these one-day mat cutting workshops, and teach people how to measure to it's actually to the 32nd of an inch, because when I most rulers just go to a 16th. So I'll say, when you're making notations, it might be like 5 and 6/16ths, and then you can put a little plus or a minus if it's actually a little bit to the right or left, and it's generally close enough. As you can see, all the work on the walls, there's like 1/4 of an inch of white, of paper-based white, and that's a difficult way of cutting a mat. When I had my exhibition at the Worcester Art Museum, the person who works there, who's a dear friend of mine, who generally cuts mats for all the exhibitions there, when I told her how I do it, they actually sent out my work. It was just too much. Mostly in museums, when they get unmatted work, they kind of cut into the image just a little bit. But I kind of, it almost feels like it's double matted, the way I do it. And for me, the presentation is really important. It's not the image, it's how it's presented. And I often tell people that good technique is invisible. No one goes to a show and says, "Wow, great mats." Nobody notices. However, if they're overcut or a little bit raggedy, that's the first thing people see all the time. And if there's any scratches on the prints, people see that as well. Most people would never even notice, but for me, as I said, good technique is invisible. And when this kind of jumps out at me, I just want it down a little bit. In fact, in my teaching, I often show before and after prints, like the raw image and then the finished image, and show people what I've done. I might as well get started. And I cut mats in kind of a special way. I leave 1/4 of an inch of white, of the paper base white, within the mat itself. So I have to measure quite precisely every time I cut a mat. And I don't have to have a standard size. I let the print sort of dictate the dimensions. So I'm very, very exacting, and often I have to use this magnifying glass, and I count out 9/16. 9/16. So that comes to okay.